Well, thank you very much for joining us for the news review. Time now to get into that, and we'll be joined by Programs Manager for Odikro, Kina Leki Mani. Kina, it's good to see you again. A very good morning to you. I think you would have to unmute.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear. Good to have you.
Thank you. Same here.
Great. So let's start off the discussion. Most definitely we're getting into the papers, but I'd like to find out from you, since we're going to be talking today on the show about that latest Global Info Analytics report on the current president's speeches, especially those on the economy, and the former presidents as well. What do you make of what you heard last Sunday from Nana Addo Dankwa, our president, on the state of our economy? What were your quick, brief takeaways?
I was stunned by the audacity to come in front of Ghanaians and say absolutely nothing. To come in front of Ghanaians and to gaslight us, to tell us things like money doesn't like noise. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Who doesn't talk up their money? When he was in opposition, they all said former President Mahama was completely incompetent. That speech was, it's like it was filled with half-truths and incomplete pictures. It was incredible that they actually pre-recorded a speech in which the president took no responsibility. So it's not like I expected much, because we know by now we know who and what our president is, but I was still stunned by the audacity of it all, the uncaring of it all, the stance. It's like in Ethiopia. Yeah.
Wow. So when you mention gaslighting, I find it interesting because more or less you are purporting he was misled. He just came and read something and that was it. You were obviously not enthused, but was it that
He was
bad?
not. No, he was not misled. Gaslighting is when you
So he came to mislead.
Yes, it was incomplete. You can't tell us, you can't bring in things like, look, we're talking about the economy of the great nation of Ghana. And I like to say great because I love my country. We're talking about the economy, we are spiraling of the economy of this great country. And we haven't been here since independence because we are obviously not being managed. So I am stunned I was actually stunned by referring to things like WhatsApp videos or whatever, bringing in French. Who the hell cares about a French proverb? If you're giving a speech to Ghanaians and you have to reach all the way to France to give us a proverb, honestly, people, honestly.
Sikampedede, and interestingly, it was trending on social media. L'argent n'aime pas le bruit, Sikampedede, and so many things. Okay.
And that is what I mean about the gaslighting. It was designed, when people are looking, unfortunately, and I'm not mincing my words, he is our president. And so whatever he says, people will take it, not necessarily in terms of believing, but they will engage with it. And the president and his PR people, because this is a very it's the most PR'd government we've ever had in Ghana. They understand that people will engage with the leader's words, even if we do not like the leader's words. So that whole French proverb and Sikampedede and all of that was designed to get us engaging with it. While the next day, people still went out and we were still gobsmacked because, let me use the English because these people are very impressed by English. We were still gobsmacked by the fact that prices were still high. People still went out and were confronted by high transportation prices. But the thing about this situation is that you can't PR it. We are beyond the PRing of our economy. The effects are here. So he just filled our time for an hour?
Just about 30 minutes. But let me quickly
30 minutes.
Let me quickly run this by you then. We're all reeling from the prices of fuel. Diesel is now 23 cedis. That's outstandingly. Yes. That's almost 10 cedis above the minimum wage. Then you have petrol.
And please, when you say things like that, that is 10 cities above the minimum wage. We need to pause here. I mean, it's now the minimum wage is now like bread. It's more costly than the minimum. We need to actually pause where we are. Don't just make statements like that and we move on. It's shocking, but please go on.
I was going to top up that petrol is almost, so diesel is almost 10 cedis above the minimum wage. Petrol at 18 cedis is almost 5 cedis above the minimum wage. Mr. President made mention of the fact that they're going to try to source cheaper fuel. And I don't know how optimistic you are about that, because looking globally, all countries are reeling from the same problem. So we do not know where exactly they're going to source this. But it's cause for hope, isn't it?
It is worrying, but it is worrying, but also on brand for this government to tell us that we are actually now going to import. That's what they are saying. They are going to import more importation. He said nothing about toll. In his 6 years, any president who comes to Ghana to lead this country, if we cannot get our own refineries running, it's like what? I mean, why do we have leadership? These are chronic problems we need to solve. But instead, no, they have actually expanded our portfolio for importing things into Ghana. And now is when you are telling us you are going to source. Now, when we began this year already worse off, we had no idea we're coming here. What? They do not use economists. It's now in November that you're going to tell us that you're going to source cheaper fuel now. And that is still your solution. You didn't add up that, oh, we're going to make sure TOR is running. So people are now going to import cheaper fuel. When have we ever? I mean, so some people are still going to make money off the fuel situation in Ghana. Like, we never learned anything from Nigeria, our closest relatives in this sub-region. We never learned. But also, we didn't learn anything from Nigeria. Nigeria is also very good about protecting some. They have actually protected some local economy. This government has done nothing to protect local economy. Now, now, I tell you that it's as though, I mean, I don't know. And what is shocking is that I'm not an economist, right? The people who are handling this economy know the dire situations we are in. They have analysts, very smart people. They have known we were coming here. There's no way they can't tell me we didn't know we were coming. We knew we were going, they knew we were going to end up here. Possibly their projections are even far worse than we could possibly, and they did nothing to make sure that we didn't end up here. I mean, in preparation for the president's speech, they couldn't put some things. The president didn't say he was cutting his ministers. They are not cutting the size of government. They haven't told us what the savings are. The Bank of Ghana has the audacity to go and harass the black market. The Bank of Ghana is forcing the mining companies to sell directly the dollars, the foreign exchange that the mining companies have, instead of putting it in the interbank market, which was what the practice was. The Bank of Ghana has the audacity to go after black market when it has never enforced the rule that we shouldn't be quoting things in dollars. There are billboards in Ghana where real estate companies are quoting prices in dollars openly while people sit in their SUVs and go to work in the Bank of Ghana, and they never thought that this is something we should fix. Are we, like, honestly? And I am not an economist, but even I know some of these things.
So I like the passion and the analysis, the critical analysis you're doing. Just to wrap on this before we get into the papers, because it's tied to this conversation. We've also followed in Parliament how the minority has been putting forward that vote of censure. There was a brief pause on that because they wanted further engagement. You also recall that the majority MPs, for the first time, which is some sort of light in our democracy, they themselves were pushing for Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to be removed, together with the minister at the office of the president, Edu Boahen. Now, we know that that vote of censure definitely will be brought back by the minority. What is your take on that? And please add to that. We've been told there's this businessman. We don't know his name. We don't know who he is. but the majority confirms that this businessman tried to give them money, whether as a bribe or whatever, in order not to set aside or remove Ken Oforiatta. How do you react to all of this?
Well, obviously, I mean, look, I want to remind everybody that we can't, right now, the situation that we are in, we'll take any light, as you are saying, that we will get. But I want to remind people that the majority MP, the majority side, sided with the government over e-levy. Now, for people who are middle class, that maybe this doesn't mean anything for you guys, but the e-levy is a completely anti-poor move. They sided with the government for that. And the minority walked out. Sometimes minority walkouts, I don't understand some of these walkouts, but anyway, this is what the parliament is. So if these same people are turning around to say, oh, we are in a crisis, we take it with a grain of salt. And of course, we saw what happened. What they are trying to do is to save their seats. But already their seats should be forfeit for e-levy. You cannot introduce e-levy in a country that is people that have such inequality, such, it's an anti-poor tax, it is an anti-women tax, it is anti-feminist. You can't, so these same people, their seats were already forfeit. Their seats should be forfeit for having had that, for having made this move. But anyway, they go and then what? Are they bullied? The president says give us 3 weeks. Apparently, does that mean that 3 weeks Ken Oforiatta is going to go? And everything that is happening, they give in. We should all be very cynical. There are lots of orchestrated moves, things to make people feel like we are doing something and to hang on to seats. That move was about the elections. I want to remind people that still after that move, we went out the next following days and the situation was still the same. That we have a whole government that is waiting on IMF. And if that was the solution, we could have gone a long time ago. I repeat that we can't have the very person and his crew who put us in this mess being the ones to deliver us out of it, quote unquote, delivery. The president has already intimated that this situation may go on till 2028. They are, in fact, Ken Oforiatta should not be one overseeing this. We do not need another budget with his imprint. Or maybe, uncle. But we know they are not listening, but, so I don't know. The thing is that the economic situation, it's not going away. So the MPs will still come back to this. People will always be coming back to this until this situation, at least the spiraling out of control of our cost of living, the cost of living should be stable. We know the way, we all know the way Ghana goes, that once the CD dollar rate, once it falls, it never goes back. Apparently, Zambia has been able to increase the kwacha against the dollar. I'm not an economist.
After they got the IMF deal, yeah.
Yes, at the very least, what we want is for things to be stabilized. And they are going to have to be very quickly and very honest and very open with the IMF. These rumors we've heard, which I don't know are substantiated, that they are not being forthcoming. And there were other things we could have taken advantage of. We asked, apparently there was a debt for whatever program. Again, I'm not an economist. We could have taken advantage of, we did not. Rumors about what? A businessman giving, attempting to bribe MPs. Nobody needs to bribe MPs. The president is not letting, the president and Ken, and this relationship, their familiar relationship, which is completely dysfunctional for Ghanaians, nobody needs to bribe the MPs. The president has no intention of firing his finance minister today as we speak. No one needs to bribe anybody. He's not listening. That relationship is completely dysfunctional for Ghana. It has been so since the beginning. It has been so, by the way, since apparently Ken Oforiatta wanted to do a progressive free SHS and his cousin, the president, said, no, we are going all out. We were always headed here because what developing country can afford en masse free education onboarding? I like free education, but free education onboarding, you have to have the middle class pay something. It's completely immoral.
Let's get into the daily graphic this morning. And it says GJA launches 2 million Ghana cedi support fund. There's also review 1992 constitution. Curtail excessive powers of presidents. Email short at an IEA forum. I don't know, but I've thought about these things, said them so many times. We have an executive that is overweening, overbearing, overpowerful. And I don't know whether when Barack Obama came into our country and said we needed strong institutions, not strong men, whether maybe we got the full thrust of that. We need white canes, blind union says.
Can I interject?
I will go into that story so that you can come through.
I have to pause. We must also be a little bit more critical with these quotations. Barack Obama came into Ghana and said we needed strong institutions and that is the exact opposite. They don't even have that in America. So we should stop where we do these things where apparently the Western democracies are what we aspire to. America is reeling from over a 30-year takeover of the Republican Party by the Tea Party people, who are systematically dismantling the institutions. They have infiltrated a minority base. So yes, we do need strong institutions, but I mean, really, we should be. I'm just saying, we all need to do better around the world. So let's desist from this West Washington.
I totally get your point. There is no perfect system, but the point to be made is definitely some of these Western countries. Look at the UK. Look at what happened recently with Kwesi Kwarteng and Liz Truss. They have a very short fuse for some of these things when you veer off the trajectory. Here it appears we seem to have such leeway for that.
I agree, but you see, when we analyze, we should educate Ghanaians more, right? They have a parliamentary system they have a different form of constitution. You see, we have the presidential type. We did a thing where we merged the presidential, the executive type of governance, democracy with the parliamentary system from the UK. The UK and a lot of the European countries, they have that party system. Parties have sway, right? A party forms a government. So those are different things. So when we analyze, we should be very, very careful. We have a constitution that puts an inordinate amount of power into the hands of the executive. That hampers us a lot in what we can do. And the wide field of play that the presidency has. So when we make these comparisons, we should educate our people, because otherwise, all we do is we further a certain level of anti-blackness. You know how many times when Ghanaians are upset at our situation, they say things like, as for the black man, they are for the bibini dear. These are all...
Well, that is excessive. That is definitely self-derogatory. I don't think we support that. But the point to be made is...
When we say these things, we should also educate. It's important we educate.
Point made.
But the systems are democratic, but they are also not the same, really.
So maybe since you started off on that trajectory, let me just get into that story. So a former commissioner of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, that is Justice Emil Francis Short, has advocated the curtailment of the excessive appointment powers of presidents under the 1992 Constitution to enhance good governance and democratic accountability. He argued, let me just get to flip the page. He argued that the excessive and unrestrained appointment powers and influence granted to presidents under the Constitution created a winner-takes-all environment to the democratic dispensation. He speaks about weak oversight, and then he talks about taking a second look, which is needed to be taken at the provision that the president's consent must be sought in the appointments of board members of state-owned media and all of that. But I can almost list so many of them off the top of my head. IGP, appointed by the president. Chief Justice, if the opening is there, appointed by the president. Of course, there are processes that go into that. As for the members of the Council of State, there are some regional representatives from here and there. Then there are additions, top-ups by Mr. President. You talk about boards, Mr. President, Mr. President, DCEs, Mr. Yes, you could say that in the districts, there will be a nomination by Mr. President, and then they would, conduct their voting. But it appears the president has such wide powers. Where do we start with this conversation? Where do we start? Is it tweaking the Constitution?
we've known that we absolutely need to amend our starter constitution. The constitution is a starter constitution. It's wonderful in some parts and it is completely inadequate in a lot of areas. And the presidential powers is one obvious, very glaring aspect. But let me also say that while our constitution needs to be reviewed, and we have gone through a process and it has been hijacked by the two political parties, right? One of the things that also hampers what the constitution sought to do is Parliament. Parliament has decided to take a very secondary role and to not do their oversight work well, to the detriment of our lives in Ghana. A lot of this is also Parliament. And we mustn't, when we talk about, we mustn't stop talking about, it's not just weak oversight. It's wholly irresponsible oversight. It is oversight where people have decided to give over their power. The Parliament has a role that no other institution, it's a very powerful role. But if you come in and you decide that you will collude with the executive, and because the executive, if you are the majority and the executive is also from your party, and that's your party leader, and that's what you're going to do. If you come into Parliament, that's all you are going to do. This is also what is going to happen to Ghana. So part of what has happened to Ghana is the story of Parliament. And yes, we have a constitution that must be amended. We started this process a long time ago. We have always known that starter constitutions must be amended. But while we are in the starter constitution, institutions can also work. It isn't always that we need to throw out this constitution. We need people to follow the law that is laid down within the constitution. We need for our institutions not to be captured by political power. We need people to understand the difference where you abide. In fact, you revel in the power the constitution has given you over the fact that you have party affiliations. You were brought in to do a job on behalf of the people of Ghana, the Parliament, the judiciary. So yes, we have a huge problem. But no, even in this stage where institutions have incredible amount of power and mandates that are precious, they are not acting according to their mandates. They're just letting executives run willy-nilly how they want over everybody else. And this is where we end ourselves.
Let me run these three stories very briefly by you. The first one, 2,961 police officers trained on standard operating procedures, and these selected police officers have been trained on standard operating procedures in handling child victims, witnesses, and offenders. Again, 50% of professionals in the justice system have been certified to deal with such cases, while 18 child-friendly, gender-based violence courts have been established across the country and 2 juvenile courts refurbished. That's the first one. The next one, we need white canes. Blind Union appeals to government. And the Ghana Blind Union has appealed to the government to provide persons with visual impairment with white canes as part of efforts to promote social inclusiveness. And Dr. Peter Obing Asamoah, who is executive director of the union, said that only about 30% of the estimated 230,000 visually impaired people had access to white canes. And he says, quote, "This is not good and it is not too much to ask the government to provide us with white canes. We should have a system that does that because the canes are basic mobility tools." I don't know, let me just add the last one. So there's the police on standard operating procedures. There's the Blind Union on white canes. And finally on page 16, prosecute illegal miners. That's according to the religious leaders. And they have called on the government to arrest and prosecute all persons involved in illegal mining, popularly known as galamsey, without fear or favor. They have also called for a temporary ban to be placed on small-scale mining. Kina, we've had a ban before. Then we came through with community mining. And in fact, we all recall Mr. President said he was putting his presidency on the line in the fight against galamsey. What's your quick reaction to these three stories as we wrap with the Daily Graphic?
He never put his well. First of all, let's leave the galamsey will be the third. I like the fact that you picked up stories that have to do with inequalities in Ghana. One of the things I heard at a feminist forum last week was that when the police are tested, when they are trained and they are tested, the training on gender-based violence and sensitivity to dealing with marginalized victims is not part of what they are tested on. So I hope that sooner, and therefore people need not really take it seriously. We appeal to the police training commanders, to the force, the institute, to make sure that because handling of domestic violence, child abuse, rape, incest, dealing with marginalized victims. These are very it's core to our to policing and to the idea of providing protection and safety throughout the justice system for victims. So we want them to be tested on it. So it's a great initiative. It is sad. You know, I always wonder, there are certain things that a leader can do that just gives them like shine, praise. One of them is just doing right by your marginalized people. Like if you do that, there's no end to global accolades. And I think this president likes global accolades. So we do not need for our blind in Ghana to be begging for white canes. These things should have been provided. And let me go back and remind everybody that I just have abandoned her post as minister for it's called, what is it called now? The Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. She abandoned her post. The president appointed a caretaker minister who already had a portfolio somewhere else.
Cecilia Abinadapa.
Yes. And then finally fired Adjosafo and now has appointed somebody. Like the commitment to safeguarding and protecting and empowering and giving freedom to marginalized people in Ghana, particularly to people who suffer disabilities, has been so lacking in this government, but also in a lot of government. But it's not a priority. Our blind should not have to beg. What are canes? One SUV. People, the petrol they used to even go on tours in the eastern region. I mean, where is our care? Who are we if we do not care for people? Who are we? What are we? Why must the blind come and ask for canes? Like,
mind-boggling, isn't it?
It's shocking. It's unkind, and you know we are going to need. And I always say this: Ghanaians, and the only system that Ghanaians are, in fact, the only system Ghanaians understand is the education system and the health system. But I want to tell the Ghanaians that systemic inequality and systemic abuse is so rampant here in Ghana. We are going to have to learn to save our own kind, to save ourselves, because it is utterly disgraceful and so wrong for the blind to come out to say that they need white canes. They are not even asking for traffic lights that take into consideration the fact that you have people with disability in Ghana. We're not even talking about overpasses and things that require cement. Our buildings most of our buildings are still inaccessible. We're not even talking about that. We're talking about canes. Canes.
And we're talking just 30% of 230,000 who have them. Let me, permit me to do the math very quickly. So
do the math.
let's just do this. Okay, times 230,000, which would mean that only 69,000 of them have the white canes, which would, let's approximate that to 70. That would mean 160,000 of them don't have.
And mind you, these are the blind people who are registered with the blind union.
Right.
And since seeing is also on a spectrum, we actually need more than that, because chances are there are people who are not completely blind, but who would benefit with some assistance with canes. Because sight, like everything else, is on a spectrum. Like I have glasses, so my eyesight is not the best. You see what I'm trying to say? So what we are talking about is the most dire. And we can't meet the needs of the most dire.
Let's get into the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Kina, we have just about some 5 minutes more. We'll make the most of it as we get into the other papers. Shatawale lands in trouble over comments on social media. Of course, he's accused Bull God. He changed from Bulldog to Bull God, and of sort of having a hand in the death of Fenwick Ochre. And now, of course, he who alleges must prove. And so Shatawale would have to, go through the legal processes. Minority calls on government to intervene in fuel price hikes. We've already spoken about some of that. They are calling on government to use the price stabilization levy, which has that as its purpose anyway. So why not use it to cushion ordinary Ghanaians? We're ready to commence work on $993 million Pualugu multipurpose dam project. That's according to the Upper East Regional Minister. What befuddles me, boggles my mind on this is we've had this on the table for how long now? And almost $1 billion project. It's still not taken off. It was expected to take off in 2020, 2 years ago. Quick reactions, Akina?
Well, let me comment on the Shatawale story. Well, first of all, for me, Shatta talks too much, but that's not what I want to point on. When I looked into this story, the police were talking about a cold case unit they have set up. Some years ago, an extended relative was shot in my village over chieftaincy. And if I tell you that seeking justice from the police has been near impossible, the case is would probably be a cold case. That was like maybe 5 years. What struck me was just how lack of effort police put towards murder cases in Ghana. And we've been here, an MP was, I think, stabbed to death in his home, and the case was made nonsense. And now Ghana police is telling us they have a cold case unit. When I look at the police force and I look at the people that go into the police force and I look at all these minds, and that our policing has really been reduced to traffic control and I don't know what, by their own administration, but also by political administration. That the fact that the police raise a majority of their institutional funds from guarding banks and stuff, and yet the crime goes unchecked and largely unpunished. If also the people who have perpetrated the crimes are powerful, have any amount of power, and if you can't depend on your police to find perpetrators of murder. So I'm hoping that the cold case unit does something. But I've been to the police headquarters. They have very little resources. They have if you even look at resources in terms of just laptops, there's very little. I don't know what we do about fingerprinting. And again, this goes to our sense of safety and protection in Ghana. So I hope that's it just they have to be able to. There has to be some urgency to clear murder cases in Ghana,
right?
And in a way that gives justice to victims. So that's the first thing. What is the other thing?
So we're also looking at the dam.
Let me say that beyond the dam. Yesterday, I think it was. I was listening to a radio station. I forget which one, and they were talking about a road in the western region. Where it's so bad when it rains, there are locks that they have to put on the road because heavy rains have damaged. There's no road, obviously, it's not tarred. And this old lady was sick and she had to be carried. And I thought to myself about construction in Ghana and how really we have to. It's like we have to do what people will call a pro needs construction, which is that all roads must be assessed on. If there isn't a road, does it pose damage, a risk to people's lives in getting to the hospital? Does it affect people, particularly people in farming and other agricultural areas? Does it hinder their access to markets? So, and obviously, dams are good things. But when I think about the construction that sometimes we do in Accra, and I think about the fact that there are roads in Ghana where there are no roads, first of all, there are parts in Ghana where when somebody is critically ill, they have to be carried over locks, over water. We need to change the way we do this country.
Definitely.
Because our lives are forfeit. And you may think that you sit in Accra and you are driving over overpasses and your lives is not forfeit. To be a Ghanaian is your life is forfeit. And we have to run this country where our lives are no longer forfeit just for being Ghanaians. So
Hina,
I mean, I don't know. Sometimes when you hear the key thing is work, we are ready to commence work. The key thing is work has not commenced. So they should stop telling us when they are ready. Because readiness can take 10 years. We know that now. So report to us when you have actually started and you are continuing and work is going on. Don't come to us when you are ready. Because we
okay.
don't know. Readiness in Ghana can take a very long time.
Kina, let's wrap with these two stories. We have less than a minute. Abesim cannibal goes for mental checkup. You would recall a Kaneshi District Court ordered the Ghana Police Service to take Richard Appiah, the 28-year-old man who killed 2 children and kept parts of the bodies in a refrigerator at Alaska, a suburb of Abesim near Sunyani in the Bono region, to a psychiatric hospital for review. And so they are checking him up mentally. That is on page 6 of the Daily Guide. And to wrap, Business Finder, Valco workers reject 22% salary increment, demand 55%. And there's this awkward situation. I have been covering it myself for my network, JoyNews. And it's interesting because the plant was shut down, and this is the only aluminium smelter in West Africa. It was shut down. Now the cost as a result of that is going to be around $12.7 million. The workers were simply demanding that you're supposed to pay us the equivalent in cedis of our dollar salaries. When the cedi depreciates against the dollar, pay us the equivalent. So many matters outstanding. We'll be discussing it today. Any quick thoughts in 30 seconds?
Well, first of all, we welcome any effort to submit perpetrators of gross crime to mental assessment.
Scrutiny, right.
As we know, we need a lot more mental psychiatric care in Ghana. So that's a good move. Look, did you say that it will cost $12.7 million to reopen?
Yes, because
$12.7 million.
Yes.
But this government has mismanaged even the COVID funds. What is 12.7 million? They should pay it, and they should give back the workers what they are asking for. Sometimes when you look at what has been misappropriated and you look at the actual cost of things, the distance is huge. What is happening that cannot be done? I don't understand. It's because priorities are misplaced. Because when you were saying when saying it has been shut down for so long and the cost to open it, I was expecting you to say somewhere around 100 million. 12.7 million, 12.7. They have misappropriated, and I'm using misappropriation kindly. The COVID funds, they could have used some of the COVID funds for this. The COVID funds they can't account for properly.
Kina Likimani, outright as always. I miss you, actually. I look forward to the next time I get to see you. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we wish you the very best of the day.
Bye-bye.
All right. Kina Likimani, of course, programs manager at Odikro, always ready, gun, on the finger on the trigger to fire away. But it's been really enjoyable having Kina this morning. Well, time now for me to leave you, but sports is up next, and we're gearing up for World Cup 2022 in Qatar. We'll be bringing you a lot more on the local and international front. Do stay.